Today we are receiving a historian and civil society leader, Gilbert Gimdo. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Mr. Babla. Thank you. Good evening, televiewers, and thank you for being with you once again. Thank you.
Despite the COVID-19, Cameroon is celebrating Unity Day today, and there are no parades because of the coronavirus. No activities, or the usual activities were not observed. However, today is National Unity Day. Are you celebrating?
Well, definitely the parades were not supposed to be. I think I side with the President of the Republic on decreeing parades not to have happened today, because parades will certainly have resulted to a lot of entangling among the population, which may have propagated to some extent unneeded the virus, which is very much scared, and which the government is so much interested in limiting its spread in Cameroon. But then we come back to the very essence of unity. The question you've asked, whether I am celebrating or not. The answer to that question depends on every Cameroonian, and it depends on the context to which you want the answer fitted, because the answer I will give you, I may give you here, will not be the same answer the next Cameroonian will give you, will not be the same answer a Cameroonian from the northwest, from the southwest, from the west region, and other parts of the country will give you, because the issue of national unity in Cameroon has become something so much questionable that sometimes when we sit on the 20th of May is coming, so many questions come. People get annoyed, people get worried, and those who have decided to continue to promote personalities instead of institutions in this country will continue to believe in what the personalities will say instead of what the statehood, what has to be of a country is supposed to be.
Now let's look at historical facts.
Yeah.
May 20. National Unity Day. October 1, the day the federal system, in which there were two separate states in the same country, was abolished, and a unitary system that merged, that deleted the lines between the two parts. Historically, which is more important in these two dates?
Yeah, thank you. Let me start by making a correction of what you just said. October 1 was not when the unitary state was abolished. October 1 was when the federal state came into functioning when the federal constitution was signed by President Ajo on September 30th, 1961, and it started functioning on October 1, 1960.
Right, thank you for that correction. That is the British Southern Cameroons changed status from a trusteeship territory under British administration to a federal state within the Cameroon that we have today. That was on October 1, 1961. Right, thank you.
To be very precise, from UNO Trust Territory of Southern Cameroons to State of West Cameroon, following the federal constitution drawn up in Fumban, or declared in Fumban on July 21st, 1961, and then the only tripartite that took place in August 1961, polished up by integrating other issues like currency, like Southern Cameroon, workers in Nigeria who weren't there by then, and how their status will be when they come back. So all those were brought up and polished in the only tripartite of August 1961, and the constitution itself was signed on September 30th, 1961, and it went into function on midnight of September 30th, getting to October 1st, 1961. That was when, on midnight, 1st September, the British Commissioner for Southern Cameroons handed the independence document to President Ahidjo, and then the Union Jack flag was brought down in Southern Cameroons, meaning that independence of Southern Cameroon has been declared, and simultaneously in reunification with the Republic of Cameroon. That's why the simultaneous nature was the reason for giving the independence document to Ahidjo, because of the simultaneous independence and reunification, which came October 1st. Now, from October 1st, federal system was born, and then it had to evolve across the 1960s to
right up to 1972 on May 20th,
yes.
On the day the Cameroonians voted in a referendum to abolish the federal system, to delete the federal lines and get into a unitary state.
Yeah, like I said, when the federal system evolved towards the early 70s, a lot of things happened. Those things that happened were both in East Cameroon and in West Cameroon. You see, let me begin from East Cameroon. But before I go on, historians will bear witness with me that historians to any level will bear witness with me that the federal government or the federal system of government was to Ahidjo as a temporal issue, was like a bridge to get to somewhere. It has hypothetical, it means to get to an end. Historians will bear witness on that. It means to get to an end. When you look at the draft constitutions that came to the Fumban Conference, the draft constitution from the Bamenda All-Party Conference that sat from 26 to 28 of June 1961, and then Ahidjo's modified constitution of the Republic of Cameroon that came together. And when you put the two drafts together, and what came up as the federal constitution was more than 90%, to be clear to you, more than 90% reflecting the modified constitution of the Republic of Cameroon, especially when it came to specific decisions that had to do with the integrity of the state, the future of the state, the weight on which the state had to do. For example, you have to do with the nature of the union, you have to do with the nature of the legislature, have to do with the nature of the executive, the powers that the executive had to do, the powers that institutions that hold every nation had to do with, because every nation that proves democratic builds institutions. It doesn't build personalities, and that's not what the federal constitution in Cameroon did. The federal constitution constructed very high, very powerful personalities whose image and whose power, whose authority was more than the institutions that the state had to depend on, and which was contrary to even France that gave independence to the Republic of Cameroon, and Britain that gave independence to Southern Cameroon. I will give you an example. When you look at Ahidjo, who was given centralized executive powers, considered as head of state, head of government, head of magistracy, head of legislature, head of magistracy, and then commander-in-chief of the army. These are things that are rare to find in a country that is really democratic, the countries that really value institutions. When you look at the 1787 Constitution of the United States that was drawn up from 1787 to where we talk now, that Constitution has been modified severally. But then there are specific issues that hold the integrity of the United States, institutions that rule the United States, that nothing can touch them. Articles in the 1787 Constitution. That Constitution till today is called the 1787 Constitution because it was drawn up by patriots who had the United States at heart, that had the America at heart. And that's why certain things that can touch the integrity of the United States of America cannot be tampered with. They can go ahead and tamper with methods by which elections are held and other ways. But when it comes to what has to do with the executive, the legislature, the judiciary of the United States, and subsidiaries like the education system and others, qualities that the United States depend on to weigh on the whole world, to prove that it is a power that rules the whole world, those are issues that the constitution cannot even touch it. Any person can do anything. But when you come to Cameroon, the federal constitution in itself, the error it did was it gave Ahidjo executive powers that permitted Ahidjo himself to touch the constitution at will. And that is why in 1972, 2nd May, Ahidjo single-handedly consults parliament, the 50-man parliament, where West Cameroon had 10 out of 50. East Cameroon had 40 out of 50. He single-handedly consults that he wishes that the state should move further, and that the federation is already proven outdated, looking at the inconveniences it is giving to Cameroonians. Well, what he promised Cameroonians was the negative parts of the federation. He did not in any way tell Cameroonians how positive the federation has been to Cameroon, how positive the federation has been to any of the two states or the federal government itself. And when he did that, he put in place some measures. He adopted measures which were very strategic. I'll give you just two. One, in West Cameroon, we are in 1972. In West Cameroon, to prepare what was materializing in 1972, started from 1968, when the lone, strong West Cameroonian who was bent on defending the institutions and the status quo of West Cameroon within the federation, that was Augustine Gomjoa, was ousted suddenly, embarrassingly, disgracefully in January 1968 and replaced by a gullible Estimona. Why do we call him gullible? I am not the only one calling him gullible. It is because all West Cameroonians, by 1968, from 1963, West Cameroonians were describing him as the federal man. The meaning of federal man means Ahidjo's man. That means that the state as a whole, take into consideration the integrity, the uniqueness of their institutions, the uniqueness of their values, did not want a person of that status quo to be at the helm, because he risked submerging it under federal control, which was no longer profitable to West Cameroon or protective to West Cameroon. Right. So in 1968, he surprisingly pushed Joa out and brought him in. And in 1970, let me just calm down. In 1970, in order to make sure that Joa, who he threw out in 1968, doesn't come back to power, because he was very aware of the prestige of Joa in West Cameroon, the popularity of Joa in West Cameroon. In order to prevent that, he dropped Foncha, the last of those who said, "Oh, sorry, I accepted one party in 1960 without knowing. I accepted this without knowing. Now it is getting to a situation where my people are going to get me blamed for nothing." So Ahidjo understood, and he now considered Jane Foncha as the last stumbling block in his cabinet. What did he do? He proposed because in the rubber stamp parliament, called a rubber stamp because it was first and foremost all dominated by UC, and on one side KNDP, who were still subsets of the UC. So when he proposed that, what happened was that he proposed that he wants to run with Estimona. He could no longer run with Foncha in the second place. He could no longer run with Foncha because he was already seeing Foncha as an obstacle. So he proposed running with Foncha, with Estimona, knowing very well that running with Estimona cannot be possible if Estimona is not the vice president. So he proposed Estimona, dropped Foncha, and then modified the constitution to permit Estimona cumulate the post of vice president of the Federal Republic and Prime Minister of West Cameroon, something that was anti-constitutional, and what has removed Foncha from the post of Prime Minister of West Cameroon in 1965.
And today the question, in some few seconds, we are rounding up with the permission of technicians behind the cameras. There are two things that happened on the 1st of October and on the 20th of May. On the 20th of May 1972, there was a referendum, and the people decided to abolish the federal lines and merge the two parts completely. And in October 1961, the two parts came together in a federal system, but were still divided by a federal line. when you look at these two dates, which of them should actually be the National Unity Day? Is it 20th of May or 1st of October?
Without mincing words, the 1st of October is the date Cameroonians, or from all angles, will feel comfortable celebrating. I'll give you just some few reasons. The first reason is that it is the date that people who were divided for more than half a century decided to come together. They decided, I won't tell you that only West Cameroonians decided to meet with their Francophone brothers, even Francophone brothers, because campaigns were in French Cameroon. Campaigns went
so in your opinion,
you find Sopopo Priso removing money and sponsoring the Cameroon Times, the lone KNDP newspaper in southern Cameroon. Ahijo meeting with Foncha in Boya, meeting with him in Konsamba, meeting with him in Yaoundé, severally in secret meetings to build up how they will come together. Although let me say this, he was disappointed because his brothers in North Cameroon had disappointed him by joining Nigeria, and he was frustrated. That's why he came down this way. These are hard facts. People will not want to hear, but let me take the pains to say it and bear the responsibility.
All right, so to you, 1st of October.
1st of October is a day it is supposed to be celebrated because it's a day that people who suffered for a long time under different heritage managed to come together.
Given historian and civil society leader who certainly have the opportunity at the weekend to come back on this with greater details. Stay with us. Equinox Wise up next.